I would like to philander you, ma'am. Would you?
I'm not sure she knows what you meant.
Would you have to say? Would you be so gracious as to philander with me?
The tease is just going to be of the phone bill, not the family. Okay.
Okay. You better make it.
Make love without serious intent.
Make love without serious intent.
Good morning. I want to give a warning to parents. When your phone bill comes this month, examine it very closely. It may well be there are a number of charges which mystify you to begin with. And we are going to present a little family story this morning in which one family found itself faced with 11 telephone calls for dial-a-porn in the United States. Kind of thing that's liable to explode, so I want to warn you about it now. On the heavier side, well, that's light. On the heavier side, I have asked Art Kube, BC Federation of Labour, to come here this morning to give me what I trust will be a positive message of compromise and reason and industrial peace in British Columbia in 1986, where we have a number of major contracts ahead, and of course we have Expo. And we're hoping, of course, that any visions of solidarity and the like are gone forever. Art Kube. And then, on a matter of considerable public interest, how confidential are your doctor's files in his office? A Vancouver lawyer, Michael Bolton, acting for one particular doctor, seems to have achieved a major victory for you, the patient, and for the medical profession. But off the top this morning, we're going to deal with Art Kube, the much criticized in years past president of the BC Federation of Labour, after the break. 90% of the membership of the BC Federation of Labour are in unions which are coming up for major contract renewals this year. Just off the top of my head, I can tell you BCGEU, the pulp workers, the IWA, Hospital Employees Union, and this potential massive confrontation of those who are working in the construction industry at the moment under the Building Trades Council. With that in mind, Mr. Kube, and with Expo 86 coming up, has the Federation and you your associates decided on a policy of reason this time, with no major wage demands and perhaps even wage cuts in some of what we're told are the overpaid trades in British Columbia?
Well, I think, Jack, in the last 3 years, unions in this province have been extremely reasonable. Wage increases have very badly lagged behind the level of inflation. You know, it wasn't us who created the confrontation. The trade union movement was in a very cooperative mood, but as you know, the provincial government decided to take on the different groups in this province. They started fights with us, they started fights with teachers, they started fights with natives, they started fights with doctors and everybody else. I don't know who has been left out.
You're not going back to, are you going back to solidarity time of 3 years ago to talk about this confrontation?
Well, look, I have never been a person who believed in confrontation for the sake of confrontation. But I think what had to be done is to express ourselves in a way which can be remembered, that a government cannot engage in very massive societal changes without broad consensus of society itself, and that's what created the confrontation. I mean, I have never...
You're still going back to solidarity. You're very defensive about solidarity.
I'm not defensive about solidarity. I think that the things which were done had to be done to raise public awareness of the issues, and that awareness is there alive and well. This year, what we're going to have to try to do is bring about some negotiated settlements, because, you know, maybe the provincial government had the luxury of making BC the laughingstock of Canada in the last 3 years. We don't intend to make BC the laughingstock of the world this year.
I don't know what that means at all. I'm sure Bennett didn't intend to make the BC the laughingstock of the world. He was trying to establish a labour climate which would attract investment in British Columbia and to balance his budget very properly.
Well, I would, the only thing I would suggest to you that government revenues as a result of the action of government have declined in the last 3 years. Capital investment has bypassed British Columbia because of the confrontational attitude of the government. The government, as a matter of fact, even commissioned a study on that particular question, which proved very exclusively that the government was responsible in every time in the confrontations which have been taking place in this province in the last 3 years.
Forget the political polls for the moment, but the man in the street is liable to say to himself, by Bennett's right for once when he says, I'm looking for jobs for the unemployed and no increases for those who presently have jobs.
Well, maybe the average person who doesn't understand economics will fall for that sort of line.
The
But
unemployed will.
Well, no, I'm not so sure the unemployed will either. But Jack, you and people who are really thinking about it will recognize that decreasing the purchasing power of the average worker does not create any employment in this province. As a matter of fact, it reduces employment. We have seen that sort of psychology of fear creating very massive personal savings in this province because nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, and at the same time, that caused the business downturn, business failures, bankruptcies left and right, and further unemployment in this province. Right now, if the government would be wise, it would sit down with its major bargaining unit, the BC Government Employees Union, which are the first up, which are in negotiations right now, negotiate an agreement which reflects the increases in the cost of living and the real needs of their employees. That would send a signal for very peaceful and tranquil negotiations in the other sectors.
I would certainly agree with your conclusion on that, in that if Bennett said COLA increases for the BCGEU, they'd probably settle because they know perfectly well they ain't going to get any real increases. But what about the construction trades? Let's face the facts of life.
Well, look, I can't...
When you've got the $23 to $28 an hour people and you've got the construction trade saying, we want $6 an hour off or we'll close down industry.
But look, I don't think that trying to do what the industry is trying to do, be very belligerent by talking, they're going to cancel the collective agreement on April the 30th and try to what? Do the Alberta situation? You know, take a look at the province of Alberta. You think it has helped the construction industry? You think it has created employment to go and destroy the construction unions?
There has been a significant increase in the work and the jobs done by non-union. The contractors say we can't afford to it, we must have a cut or we'll be out of business.
Jack, that's not true. The problem we have in British Columbia, there is a tremendous slack in construction activities. Construction permits have been down by about 50%. That is the problem. You know, I don't think the problem is, as some people try to state it, that you have the organized sector. Look, take a look at the organized sector. The organized sector provides skilled workers whose productivity is extremely high, okay, who are doing quality work. I mean, I hear day in, day out, non-union contractor building construction jobs where they are being sued for shoddy workmanship and so on and so forth.
But Art, be practical. I'm telling you what the CLRA says. It says unless we get, they say they've already got 200 small companies bankrupt over the past few years. Unless we get about $6 an hour, they'll probably settle for $3 off the present rates, they're going to close down because there's nothing to bid on either.
So they have 60 or whatever companies who are going broke. Look at the number of business bankruptcies you have in this province. I don't think that they're any worse off than any of the other businesses. The problem in this province is the lack of economic activity. And the lack of economic activity relates back very largely to the actions of the provincial government.
Fair enough, that's your political position.
No, I'm not so sure of my political position. I think that's the position of any economist who has been looking at the economy of British Columbia in the last 3 years.
But you say there's no need for highly paid union people to take any cuts in 1986.
I don't think that will create a single additional job, but I tell you it will further slow down consumption in this province, because you know what the problem you have in this province is that there is an utter lack of consumption. Unless consumption is somewhat increased, you're not going to see any capital investment, you're not going to see any expenditures, you're not going to see any additional job creation.
But firms who are going into the red in the balance sheet can't be expected to give wage increases at this time.
Well, Look, I don't think that the building trades are out for any major wage increases. The building trade settlement the last time around only took care of the increases in their fringe benefit package. I don't see any union going out and saying, look, we're going to make some massive gains and so on and so forth. Unions have generally said, look, it's not helpful to the provincial economy to see the purchasing power of workers further decreased. Okay, that's been the general position. Settlements in the last 3 years been below the national average. Look at the conference report projection nationally. They're talking about increases of 3.8%. And they're not getting too alarmed over it.
For 1986.
For 1986. Well, I think that if that holds true in British Columbia, you're going to see extremely peaceful industrial relations in this province. We're going to have our fare, and hopefully, we can open up the purse strings of personal savings in this province, which are now over $33 billion, and bring about greater economic activity, more job creation, and generally better benefits.
Art Kube tells Webster a little moderation by the unions and intelligent callers from the employers, and we'll have a good year.
Well, I think that as long as no side is belligerent in their attitude, there's room for settlements in this province.
Your comments to Art Kube of the BC Federation of Labour after the break. I hear that instead of paying their full per capita, because you're still kind of edgy with the IWA after your clash with Monroe, that they gave $20,000 to the food bank instead of per capita to the union. Is that right?
No, we negotiated some outstanding back per capita, and they made a $20,000 contribution to the 29 unemployment action centers across the province.
Mm-hmm. Food banks going high, wide, and handsome.
Well,
do you help them?
Yeah, well, we run ourselves a number of food banks along with our unemployment action centers. We also assist the Vancouver Food Bank. Yeah.
Go ahead to Art Kube, BC Fed.
Yeah, I'd just like to agree with Mr. Kube on the statement that he said the reason we are having problems and the companies want such rash cuts is because there is no employment out there. There is no jobs. That is the reason. It's not a political.
How long have you been out of work?
I've been out for 5 months right now. I'm a house husband.
What's your trade?
I am an iron worker.
And your wife is working?
Yes, she is.
That'll keep you going. Best of luck. So there's somebody who agrees with you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Yep.
Mr. Kube, I'm one of those non-skilled workers who is earning a maximum wage of $4.50 an hour. And I'm non-unionized, and as long as I'm earning that kind of pay, I never will be. And I take certain offense at your remarks as to non-unionized workers producing shoddy work. If I don't work hard and work good, I'm out on the street, and one of those other people looking for a job has got my job.
At $4.50 an hour?
At $4.50 an hour. And I'm trying to keep up with these unionized people who are earning $28, $30 an hour.
Well, I think, you see, that's the sort of fallacy and myth about people who earn $25 and $30 an hour. What I talk about in terms of shoddy workmanship is very largely in the construction industry. We see major construction jobs which have gone non-union, where there is a tremendous amount of shoddy workmanship.
But there's a tremendous amount of acceptable building done by the non-union people too. You just can't slander them all out just like that. All non-union work is shoddy.
I'm not, look, what you have to understand, Jack, that part of the construction industry is also the training programs where we train the best tradesmen in North America, okay? And so, you know, you have to have certain knowledge, you have to have certain skills to perform good work.
But that's not the most important issue at the present time, and that is the fact that there are so many people that are earning close to minimum wage, and we're trying to keep up with people who've got unionized jobs that are earning an average of $15 an hour and up.
Look,
and we're not getting any help from BC Federation of Labour.
Well,
if
just
I have
a
a
second.
complaint with my employer and I have to go to the Employment Standards Board, I get no help from you. All
well,
you're
that's
doing
not
is looking
true.
after
That's not
unionized
true.
people. The majority of the people in the province are being left behind.
Well, look, that's not true. That's not true. I mean,
you can't monitor the non-union jobs and go after the employment standards.
Yes,
all the
we
time.
do. We do, Jack. We have in this province 29 unemployment action centers who cost us approximately $60,000 a month, who handle virtually thousands of cases of complaints in, where there's violation of labor standards, where there's a violation in terms of UI regulations, welfare.
Agreed.
These centers are helping thousands and thousands of workers poorly wage workers. This federation has pushed very hard to try to bring increases in the minimum wage in this province. So, any low-paid worker who's saying that the trade union movement is not trying to assist them in many ways doesn't either know the services the trade union movement is providing or on purpose sets out to distort the
I
truth.
accept what you say, but that call there from this chap here demonstrates perfectly the incredible division between the guy and the building trades are on 22 plus $7 fringes. Just a second. The guy at 450 thinks if there'd be more work around if you brought down the wages for these highly paid people. That's what they think.
Look, Jack, the average hours per year of an organized building trade workers in this province has been less than 1,000 in the last 2 or 3 years.
True, UIC the rest of the year.
Well, UIC, but if you look at the average increase, the average wage of construction workers on a year-round basis, you will find that they're not making these big incomes everybody thinks they're making.
Could it not be the attitude of the man in the street that the building trades especially have priced themselves out of competition for odd jobs?
I agree.
Look.
Can I finish with one statement and let you carry on?
One statement, go on.
I was born and raised in Powell River. I have a highly unionized family in that pulp mill. I'm 32 years old. I've never earned more than $5 an hour. I am now at the point I would willingly scab. I'm very anti-union because I've seen them go ahead and look after themselves. I'm all right, Jack. Tough luck with you.
Thank
you.
And I think
that attitude is growing very largely in this province.
Isn't that tragic? A man of 32 who's never worked for more than $5 an hour.
Well, look, I don't know the particular situation, but I suggest to you that if you look at the record of the trade union movement, we have fought for free education in this country. We have fought for training programs. We have fought for apprenticeships. And, you know, somebody in Powell River, you know, who says that, you know, everybody in Powell River whose father worked in the mill usually gets a job into the mill unless there's something drastically wrong. Now, I'm not trying to in any way belittle that person. That person might have some misfortunes in life, but surely trying to blame the trade union movement that person isn't able to get a job for more than $5 an hour.
Without the trade union movement, Art, and I can say this without fear of contradiction, we'd all be working for $1.25 an hour to this day. But many people feel it's got into a total imbalance. Let's go to the next call from Nanaimo.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, first off, I'd like to get off on the right foot here and tell you how much I appreciate your show and yourself, because I think you're doing a great job. I wanted to get that off first because I have to criticize you in this case. You are telling me, and a previous caller is telling me, that I'm making between $23 and $25 an hour. I am one of the higher paid trade unionists, and I have never come any place close to even $20 an hour, never mind $23, $25, or $30 an hour.
Which union?
I'd like to know where you get these figures from. You're very uninformed, and so was your previous caller.
No, on the building trades industry, the figures come from Chuck McVeigh, the negotiator for the Construction Labor Relations Association, and if I had time, I could play you the clip from the interview about 2 weeks ago.
Well, he is certainly wrong, too.
Okay, what trade are you in?
I'm in operating engineers.
Operating engineers?
That's right.
You make what, 16, 17 bucks an hour in fringes?
About $17 an hour, yeah.
Plus fringes?
Yeah.
Ask him how many hours he works.
How many hours are you working these days?
I've worked 5 months in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. You know?
Yeah, 5 months.
There you go.
Well, and any chance, how old are you?
I'm 50.
Any chance of a job?
I see no chance at all.
Could you want to tell me about, is your wife working?
No.
So you're in desperate straits?
That's right.
Well, you know, I mean, that's the point I'm trying to make. The problem in this province is that we don't have sufficient economic activity to lead us back towards full employment. We have created a psychology of fear where even the money isn't being circulated. A good number of our members who are working don't know if they're going to be able to work in 6 months or 12 months.
You can't blame Bennett alone for all of it.
Well, look, Bill Bennett has created that crisis of confidence. It's not only me saying it, it's the business community is starting to say that now, and every economist you can talk to will say to you that a good amount of our economic problems is psychological, where people are engaging in self-protection schemes which are very deficient to the economy.
Thanks for your call, and my apologies to you particularly, caller from Nanaimo. Is it break time? After the break. Art Kube. It's amazing the number of phone calls I get nowadays from very intelligent, unemployed tradesmen, workers. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack. Morning, Mr. Kube. I agree with what you have to say. I'm an employee at HEU for the past, off and on for 7 years. These last 2 years, I've worked part-time at 2 healthcare facilities, and I can't get full-time work. I'm applying every posting on the board to get full-time work. I can't get it. I work as a nursing orderly. What I'm forced to do is I'm forced on my own is to go back to school, pay for it myself in the evenings, where I miss 3 calls a week for evening work, to go back to school to get more qualifications to keep me in the healthcare field because I'm being phased out. And now we're here in a contract coming up. I don't know if you're familiar with the HEU contract, but they're trying to cut our sick time. And this fall, myself being down with the flu, I couldn't go into work. But with the new contract, they're trying to say you have to be off to work sick 4 days, and on the 4th day you get paid. That'll be forcing people to go into work sick just so they can get paid. That's ridiculous. People are already sick in the hospital as patients, and they're going to have sick employees coming in due to the fact that they can't afford to be off work. I work about 50% a year on call basis, and sometimes I can't make those calls. It's just ridiculous. And we're finding employees, out for each other, trying to cover their own butts by just staying at home all day long, not being able to go outside, waiting for the phone to ring to go into work. It's just crazy.
Okay.
There's a tremendous amount of pressure on the unemployed of this province. And the tragedies which exist day in and day out. I mean, a lot of people don't know in this province that the Federation spends more than half of its income, okay, to run unemployment action centers across this province to assist the unemployed, the people on public assistance, because there are tragedies after tragedies after tragedies. And we don't look at the economic costs of unemployment in this province.
I'm going to have Jack Giroux on one day next week on your negotiations. Your convention starts at the weekend, doesn't it? HEU? I'm thinking that.
It doesn't.
Eh? Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Kube.
Good morning.
I'm sure that you're saying some of this for the consumption of your union, but I would like to get out a statement and have you respond. You cannot deny that the Canadian economy is changing radically, and we have a threat from our own government in the form of free trade with Canadian and American people. We have deregulation pursued in our transportation industry that's throwing the transportation industry into an upheaval. You have people now that are going to have to face the fact that they have to become more competitive with our American neighbors in order to survive. And for you to be insisting on a policy of maintaining high wages and having no negotiations with your employers in regards to concessions, I think that you will be destroying the lives and livelihoods of your members.
Madam, look, we are not economic imbeciles or economically incompetent. We recognize the question that our economies are changing, that we cannot solely rely on our natural resources, that we have to have some structural problems in terms of unemployment and so on and so forth. I recognize those, and the trade union movement recognizes those. But they're not going to be solved by the question, for instance, of free trade. They're not going to be solved by the question of deregulations, because in both instances, it's a further attack against the living standards of Canadian workers.
If you've come to the conclusion that, yes, we are changing, then what have you decided in your statements and your policies?
Well, madam,
will concede to your employers,
okay,
or
look,
to the employers of your members.
Look.
How have you faced this?
There's a book out very recently. It's called The Next Canadian Economy. I would suggest that Diane Cohen and Kristen Shannon wrote that book. And they're talking about the differences between two provinces which basically had to face economic change. The province of Manitoba and the province of British Columbia. In one instance, you had a government which was concerned about the needs of people, sat down with different groups, including the trade unions, and said, look, we have some severe economic problems in our province. Let's see what we can do to resolve our difficulties.
What did they do, though?
Okay. For instance, on a question of negotiations with the public sector, I don't know if you recall. These unions had, the Public Service Union, the Provincial Government Employees Union in Manitoba, had signed a collective agreement which was at the height of inflation, and then when inflation was going down, it was most likely somewhat too high. They sit down with that union and say, look, you know.
Did they negotiate downwards?
They exchanged, they mixed exchanges. They made exchanges. They say, look, you maybe don't need these increases. I think it was about 11%. But in return for reducing that increase, we're going to take a look at the question of guaranteeing jobs, and we're also going to do some job investments around the province. In Manitoba right now, you have the lowest unemployment in this country. You have the most massive capital investment going on, you know, and the future for Manitobans is extremely bright. Here in this province, I remember when I got elected in 1983, the first official thing I did, myself and the Secretary-Treasurer of the Federation went and saw Mr. Bennett and say, look, you just received a mandate from the people of this province. We recognize the economic problems in this province. Why don't we sit down and talk about those? Well, the Premier gave us some lip service. Then without any consultation, he brought in the most regressive legislative package on July 10th of that particular year, which really led us down to the road.
So now you don't trust Bennett at all, do you?
Well, who does?
Well, answer your own question. You don't trust him.
No.
Thanks, ma'am. Go ahead from Alberni.
Hello, Art.
Hi.
Hello, Art.
Yeah?
Yes?
Yeah, I've been in the construction business for 35 years. I've run my own heavy-duty construction business for 20. Not the wages that kills us, it's the fringe benefits, and you just brought them up again today. When I go into an outlying area in the boondocks to build something or put in a piece of road, I got to have a pool table, I got to have all this crap. Now, this is what we don't need. I don't mind paying their wages, but when you add all these fringe benefits on that are not productive hours to get the job done, there's no way I can compete against non-union outfits.
Well,
you guys better start learning that and drop all that garbage that you got hanging on the end of us that amounts to about $7 or $8 or $9 an hour.
Is he not correct in that? That there's a little businessman who cannot compete against non-union, and to maintain his position, the unions must retrench on fringe benefits.
Look, I don't know. I think I know what industry he is in. I think he's most likely building roads for the logging companies.
Right.
You know.
Not I build for anybody.
Pardon me?
He builds for anybody.
Oh, anyone. Well, I'm not so sure that, you know, I don't know of any contractor who has to provide pool tables on construction sites.
He says you don't have to provide pool tables.
I mean, that's...
Well, he better get back and study some things. If I get some rodmen in there to pour a little bit of concrete for a footing for a bridge, they have to have a pool table. They have to have lots of things. You read all those contracts and you'll find out.
Well, I read collective agreements, and let me tell you, there are some recreation facilities which are required at far northern jobs, but out of Port Alberni, I don't know any construction site out of Port Alberni which requires pool tables.
I don't just construct around Port Alberni. I go all over the mainland too, wherever I can get a bid.
Okay, thanks for your call. One final segment with Art after the break. Art Kube.
Yes, good morning,
Good stuff.
Jack.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yes, I've got one comment and then a question for Mr. Kube. First of all, I'd like to say that I think the unions were good when they first started out. They gave the balance of power to the worker, and they've been struggling. Now I feel they've abused that. And furthermore, if the unions' representatives feel that the companies are making so much money, then why don't they simply start buying the companies, run them themselves? That way they would have no labor arguments. They wouldn't have to stop work in order to get their agreements. They could just pass them right on.
The man is being sardonic to you.
Well, look, I mean, that's sheer nonsense what that man is talking about. I never made the statement that companies in this province are making too much money. Let me tell you, the greatest sin the company can commit is not to make a profit. Citing Samuel Gomfer.
I can understand the guy's sardonicism, but it's not quite apropos. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Webster. I worked for a non-union contractor this year who hired me at $13 an hour as an electrician.
Right.
He, on payday, came around and gave me a check which equaled out to $12 an hour.
Uh-huh.
But if I didn't like it, I could lose my job. A month and a half goes by because I needed the work. A month and a half went by. Payday comes around again. He says, we're not paying you till the end of the month. If you don't like that, you can be laid off again, which I got upset, and he laid me off immediately. I asked him when I could get my paycheck. He said, come in tomorrow, and you can get your check. I showed up the following day to get my check. No check. Took me 2.5 months to the labor relations to get my check, or employment standards.
Are you working now?
No, I'm not. I've worked for 2.5 months over the last 2.5 years.
What are you living on, UIC?
I'm on welfare right now, and at $630 a month.
Yeah. I mean, Jack, you see, I mean, the caller really makes my point. If the unions would agree, let's say, to a wage reduction in the construction industry, what would happen is, instead of that caller working for the 11 or 12 bucks, he most likely would be working for 7 or 6 bucks. You know, where do you stop? Where do you stop? I mean, a lot of people don't understand that, you know, the cost of living hasn't gone down in this province. The cost of living in this province has continued to rise. I know it's not rising as fast as in the rest of the country, but, you know, did the standard of living of BC workers increase in the last 10 years?
Let me give a word of sympathy. I believe what you tell me, caller, and the best of luck. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack. I agree with that last caller. I'm fully supportive of. What I want to talk about is I'm a construction worker, and about the wages that I got up at Revelstoke Dam. I want to recall your documentary you did up there.
Right.
I remember the comment you said you'd never work up here for that kind of money.
No, I wouldn't have gone near the place for double the money.
I only made $17.75 an hour up there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
tell me, are you working now?
No, I'm not working.
Are you a rock worker?
No, I'm on unemployment insurance.
But what's your trade?
I'm a carpenter. I took a foreman job for 12 bucks an hour, and when I got paid, he knocked the wages down to 10.
This is a non-union job recently?
Yes.
How can that happen?
Yeah, well,
also, you take a grocery store worker who works for Safeway, they get $14, $16, $18 a day, and they're working 12 months a year, and a construction worker is only working.
Oh, I know, I agree. That always seemed to be a kind of imbalance which annoyed even other trade union men, but they're having a tough time now with a new competition.
Yeah, well, there's a conflict of interest with Mr. Bennett. He's been out to beg the unions, and where did Mr. Kirchhoff get his money with? I would say he got backing from Mr. Bennett.
No, he did not get backing from Mr. Bennett.
Well, look.
No, that's not.
Look, except that, look, the bidding procedures on public contracts has sunk to the level where solely the lowest bidder counts, regardless if that company can put up a performance bond, regardless what the record of or the history of that company is on job performance or anything else.
Well, yeah. I don't accept what you say about that. I think it's perfectly proper and normal for non-union companies to be free to bid in this province if they want to under the same terms as anybody else.
Providing they're prepared to pay the training costs unionized companies had to pay for years.
Let me give you the classic answer. It's up to you to organize the unorganized. That's one of your functions.
Jack, you come from an industrial union background, where you have a plant where workers are working, which you can contact. Trying to organize in the construction industry as it is right now with all kinds of subcontractors subcontractors is just like nail and glue, like nail and jelly to a tree.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Yep.
I'd like to address Mr. Kube. I'm a union apprentice, and things are looking pretty bleak. We've got 1,400 members in my union that are unemployed right now. I'm very close to getting my journeyman papers, and things are not looking good. And I personally do not think a wage cut is going to help us.
Go on.
Not going to create jobs. There's no indication of that, and it's just ridiculous to think that a cut in wages is going to
create employment. Tell me, what about, how close are you to getting your journeyman's ticket?
Got about 6 more months to go.
Okay, give you a classic example. The trade union movement sat down with the Ministry of Labor about 3 years ago, and we said, look, we have massive unemployment coming. There are some people who are in their third year apprenticeship. They have only 5 or 6 months to go. What can we do to get them to finish their apprenticeship? We did some expediting internal training. okay? And a good number of people were able to get their apprenticeship. I hope that...
My union personally had a trade school going. Unfortunately, it had to fold because of lack of
funds.
backing from the Ministry of Labor.
How old are you?
I'm 25 years old.
Married or single?
I'm single.
Living?
And I couldn't afford to be married even if I wanted to be.
What are you living on?
I'm one of the few that's working right now.
Best of luck, and I hope you get your papers in time for you know. Go ahead from Kelowna.
Yeah, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I work for Local 300, the brewery workers, and I work at a local winery here in Kelowna.
Uh-huh.
I just wanted to say that the labor costs in our union is only 5%.
Right.
And most of the costs, they're coming from the government, the taxes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the companies are laying off people trying to cut costs.
Right.
But we're not the majority of the cost.
How many people have been laid off in your plant?
Oh, over the last 3 years, about 80.
Well, I hope...
Well, look, I mean, that's another thing. You see, for instance, we have closure after closure in a distillery business. You know, we had the closures of 3 major distilleries now in the last 5 years. The government could say, look, if you want to sell your booze in this province, you want to have a listing at the Liquor Control Board, you bloody well produce your booze in this province. The government has not intervened. They let these companies close down. They moved back east. We have lost virtually thousands of jobs because the government didn't intervene. Classic example, Dome Glass, right here in Burnaby. We lost over 300 jobs. The government didn't even try to attempt to convince that company that if they want to sell their beer bottles here,
they should stay here.
They should stay here.
Art, anyway, beneath all of it, there is a desire for no confrontation and moderation in the negotiations and with the government and the unions this year. Tell me that much.
Well, Art Kube has never been known to be ready to start the revolution.
That's quite well put. And we'll leave it at that. My thanks to Art Kube. Next, we're going to speak to Michael Bolton, who's been acting for the confidentiality of your files on behalf of a specific doctor. After the break.
Card. All they need is to know the number, know how to dial, and this is what they can get.
Don't mind her. She gets a little crazy. You go on home. I think you like seeing my fuzzy little bush. Just watching me sing to myself. Okay, Sue, I'll show you. Just watch me ride this stallion. Oh, the horn is so hard.
We can't repeat any more of this, the sexual fantasy of 2 young girls in a play.
This is what they can get.
Don't mind her. She gets a little crazy. You go.
This is what they can get.
Don't mind her.
Get.
Don't mind her. She gets a little crazy. You go.
Number, know how to dial, and this is what they can get.
Don't mind her.
The College of Physicians and Surgeons, which has got many problems of its own these days with unhappy doctors, recently lost the power on a BC Court of Appeal ruling which struck down a section of the Medical Practitioners Act that gave the college authority to remove the files of doctors under investigation for alleged violations of the college's regulations. Is that the case you won?
That is, Jack. That's precisely it.
How did that affect the confidentiality of my records with my doctor?
Well, the power that the college had was to remove patient files from a doctor's office in the course of a mere investigation. In this particular case, we had described that as a fishing expedition kind of investigation. That is to say, there was no specific charge or allegation being investigated or adjudicated by the college. That meant that in this case, they'd applied for 70 of the doctor's patient files. They were going to take them away under the authority of Rule 12. They could examine those at their leisure. This examination, at least the seizure, was being done by a lay person, that is not a medical doctor, an investigator, and there would be absolutely no privacy guaranteed to the patient in those files once they were removed from their own doctor's office.
So the plan was for this lay investigator to walk into your client's office and say, I want to go through your files on a fishing expedition, take 70 particular files, was it?
70 patient files was what was sought in this particular case.
Is it proper for you to tell me, you must know what the suspicion was? What was it they wanted to investigate, broadly speaking?
Broadly speaking, all that was referred to in the affidavit material was a suggestion that there might be over-servicing of the patients, that is too many attendances, or overbilling of the plan.
In other words,
it was very broadly stated. It was not specifically stated at all.
What was you got the ruling therefore? Has it been laid down now therefore that the college cannot ever look at my files in my doctor's office?
Not at all, not at all. The college is not inhibited from investigating. The college can investigate in the same manner that a police officer can investigate a crime. The college can go and they can interview, they can request files and so on. They don't have, and what this ruling means is they don't have an absolute right to take away and remove patient files except under the authority of a particular inquiry or a particular charge. So that there's nothing there that stops the college from investigating. All that the BC Court of Appeal has done has ruled that this, what I style as a draconian power, really, an incredibly broad power, to take away patient files in the course of a mere investigation without any specific allegations being involved.
In other words, could walk in and say, well, Dr. Webster, we're a little bit suspicious about you, so where's the key to your filing cabinet? And here's my lay non-medical investigator who is going to go through all your patients' files, read all the confidential matters, and take them away.
In theory, that could have been possible. It could have taken all the files away.
Was it done before, prior to your ruling?
It's been done very commonly in college investigations because, as far as I know, Dr. Bishop is the first doctor to have raised this particular objection, and certainly is the first doctor to succeed in overturning Rule 12.
So the position now is that the college can still investigate by request?
The college can investigate by request. There's nothing to stop the provincial government, for example, in collaboration with the college, from enacting a different kind of rule, one that might have some built-in safeguards to ensure that patient confidentiality is not jeopardized unless there is a real and demonstrable public interest involved in the particular investigation. But the effect of this ruling is that there won't be the jeopardization of patient privacy on mere fishing expeditions.
Does this come under the Charter? I mean, does this come under our famous Charter of Rights and Freedom as such?
It's a very interesting question, Jack. In first instance, in the trial division of the Supreme Court, Mr. Justice David Hines ruled in Dr. Bishop's favor on both the question of the powers of the college, whether the law entabled them to do this kind of removal of files, and secondly, he also ruled in their favor that, in Dr. Bishop's favor, that this would be a violation of his right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure under Section 8 of the Charter. So on both grounds, at first instance, the case was won. The BC Court of Appeal dealt only with the question of the college's powers, thereby leaving intact Justice Hines' decision on the unreasonable search and seizure aspect. So that remains law.
Just while you're here, there's another fascinating legal matter about which the Globe and Mail is conducting a great campaign on, and that's on the question of search warrants by the government.
That's right.
And the issue there seems to be, I had at first thought, well, if they come to me with a search warrant, that should be kept private because it's only an investigation. I haven't been charged, far be it convicted, but I'm beginning to change my mind on that. I'm beginning to think that every time they put a search warrant out, we should know about it. What do you think of that particular? What's that under that thing?
That's under the criminal code and under the search warrant sections of the criminal code. The history of that is there was a CBC reporter named Lyndon McIntyre who wanted to have access to search warrants for a story he was doing. He took the case all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada and won the right to have public and media access to search warrants and the information's sworn, the data that the police officer used to persuade the justice to give the search warrant.
Yeah, I have reasonable and probable cause that Jack Webster is running this and that kind of criminal scam.
Exactly.
And I want to go to his house and his place of business and see his documents.
Precisely.
So this Lyndon McIntyre...
So Lyndon McIntyre won his case in the Supreme Court of Canada. Then the government of the day, which was the Liberals then, and the Tories have since picked it up, decided there had to be something to protect, A, the secrecy of police investigations, because there might not be charges laid right away, and also, B, the privacy of the person who is the subject of the search. But what they have done is enact something that is this broad. What it says is that where a search has been made via a search warrant, no one can have access to that search warrant and publish anything in regard to that search unless they have the consent of every person either in control of the premises searched or every suspect who may be a suspect in relation to any charge arising from the subject matter of that search. So it's a very broad thing, and you would, in order to do a media story, for example, a press story about whether the search was harassment or whether it was justified, you'd have to get the consent of every suspect who is suspected of a crime that might be relevant to that search.
All parties voted for this in the House of Commons, did they not?
They did, even, that's right, even the Liberal and the NDP people.
Well, I can visualize, I believe there's a situation in Ontario now whereby the press or the media want to get at something which involves the police very much, and at the moment we're muzzled. Even if you come to me and say, I've been searched unjustly on this particular warrant, God knows why they're doing it, if you're the only person named in it and you give me permission, I can use the story.
What might happen, for example, is you might have 7 persons that the police suspect of a crime, and the search is involving an investigation of that. 6 of those persons might be entirely innocent persons who are being, in effect, harassed. They might want the media to bring and focus some attention on the way in which their privacy is being interrupted. 1 person may be a suspected criminal person, may not wish to give consent to the release of the search warrant and the information, and thereby the public is inhibited from knowing.
Do you believe, therefore, that when a search warrant is sought by the police and executed by the police on what they call on their affidavits, that should be publicly accessible right away?
Save and accept this. I think there is a danger if there's a pending trial. There is a danger because the information on that search warrant, some of it may not be true. The accused may take the position that some of it's exaggerated. Some of it may be quite prejudicial. And if there's a trial pending, then I think a justice of the peace or a magistrate ought to exercise a discretion as to whether to allow the right to a fair trial to prevail over the right of the public to know.
But if there's a search warrant, there's always a possibility of a trial.
There's always the possibility, but often there isn't a trial. And often
just a fishing expedition.
It could be a fishing expedition.
Yeah, and as in your case, back to your case, what you've done is stop fishing expeditions by the college investigators into the privacy of the doctor's files.
That's correct.
And there are other ample ways where they can investigate as they wish in the public interest.
They're not inhibited from investigating at all.
Okay, calls and questions to Michael Bolton, Vancouver lawyer, after the break. Well, I don't know what kind of questions we'll get, Mike, but you're used to them, and I'm used to them. Go ahead to Mike Bolton.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Mr. Bolton.
Morning.
In reference to your comment about this would not obstruct both the College of Physicians and the police, say perhaps conducting an investigation, there was a case approximately a year ago involving several physicians in Vancouver alleged to have committed infractions of almost trafficking in...
I don't remember the details, but what's your point?
That in a lot of cases there was a lot of requests from the College of Physicians to put an abrupt end to this type of a situation through the police and through the medical association. And I feel there was a generally a lot of cooperation, but there was a real reluctance because of staying of criminal charges.
Well, I don't know. I think you're talking in circles. We can hardly give you an answer to that one, can we?
Well, your guest is obviously, it's my opinion, that making restrictions and information being available to the press and to the public could result in the investigation either being not concluded to a successful end, or to
cover up
to the goal of the investigation being obstructed.
I don't think that's accurate because in that particular case that the caller speaks of, there was a police investigation. My recollection of it is that there were undercover police officers, for example, trying to make purchases of alleged narcotic or unlawful drugs from these doctors. Normal police methods of investigation were used in that case and can always be used in those kind of situations. You don't need what I've called draconian powers in the College of Physicians and Surgeons in order to investigate crime, whether that crime be committed by a doctor, a lawyer, or anyone else.
Does your case affect, supposing a charge of some kind is against the doctor and it finally comes to a college hearing, does the college then have full access to all the materials?
Exactly, they do. In the course of a college hearing, they're in the same position as, for example, the benchers of the Law Society or any other professional body and responsible for disciplining its own members. The college has the powers of subpoena which are equivalent to a Supreme Court judge.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Bolton. I would like to ask you if you could give me an example of what starts a fishing expedition. You know, there must be some grounds, there must be some kind of suspicions to make them start a fishing expedition.
Yeah. I think I can answer that. The way in which...
Number two is, I would also like, do patients now have a right to see their files and to get their files if they think that there is something wrong or has been some wrongdoing? Have they a right to their files now?
Well, you've raised two very important and broad questions. You know, to deal with the latter one first, do patients have a right to their files? The right to privacy in the files is the patient's right to privacy. However, the file, in a specific sense, is the property, the realty or the chattel of the doctor. So that I think that's a very interesting question, and I wouldn't proffer an absolute answer to it.
For instance, if I were to ask you, do I own my own x-rays? Do they belong to me or the doctor?
Don't.
I don't.
You don't own them. Whether you have a right to see them, a right to access to them, there may be some limited right to access, but you don't have a right to own them.
But if I'm going for a lawsuit for medical malpractice, I can then get them.
You can then get them, that's right.
By a court order or something.
That's right.
Now what about the first question, which was about fishing expeditions? I forget your question.
Well, I ask what will start? I mean, what grounds do they have to...
I understood the caller's question. The way in which doctors under the medical services plan are monitored is that their billing profiles are monitored by statistical methods by the Medical Services Commission. And it's a very unusual way for any person who's in business or who's in a profession to have their business monitored. But if they are one or two standard deviations from the mean, that's the kind of thing that can give rise to an investigation and to what I call a fishing expedition. There might be no real evidence.
In other words, it's a computerized study of the pattern of practice.
It's a computerized study of the pattern of practice. That's precisely correct.
It was once put to me like this, that if a doctor, for instance, was doing appendectomies every day of the week for 6 months in a row, that would come up as an unusual kind of operation, and they'd look at it.
That's right. He would look unusual if he had a lot of geriatric old age patients who might require more attendances than, for example, very young people. That's the kind of thing that would cause his pattern of practice to look unusual and might start an investigation. So that's why I say they can easily be fishing expeditions.
Thank you, but we must expect our medical service money spenders to look to see if there is overutilization or
the monitoring of the plan, which is a great public protection, is very important.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my question is in regard to search warrants. You were talking earlier about what they have to do to get a search warrant, and my question is, when they get a search warrant and they come to a family dwelling, do they have to state or show a search warrant? And if not, do they have the right to come in, look around the house, and state no information about why they're there? And in my particular case, they stated incorrect information about why they were there. 12 policemen walked around the house, looked for me, and left. And I'm just wondering if when they show up at your door, if they have to show a search warrant or state that they have a search warrant, because in my case they did not do that.
You've got to, if there's a search warrant that's been obtained by a police officer appearing before a justice of the peace, you're entitled to have a copy of it. The normal practice would be the officer to whom the warrant is issued would supply you with a copy. If it's a telewarrant, that is a warrant that a police officer has obtained by a mere telephone call to a justice of the peace, which since December the 4th of last year we have in our law. then you have to be given a facsimile of the telewarrant, basically an indication of the contents of the telewarrant, and you can obtain a copy of the full warrant at a later time once it has been turned over by the police officer to the Justice of the Peace.
If a police officer comes to the door and says, I have a warrant, and doesn't show it, you do not have to let him in.
He's got to show you the warrant. He's got to justify his presence there. No police officer has the right to enter anyone's premises without a search warrant.
And if they don't exercise that right, do I have any legal action?
You certainly do. That's an unlawful entry of your home. You could
That's what happened in this case. 12 of them just walked in through the house, stated no. Actually, they stated they were looking for me regarding a traffic violation, and that was a...
Not entitled to enter your home to look for you under any circumstances unless they have a search warrant.
12, just a minute. 12 for a traffic violation?
That's what they said. It wasn't a traffic violation. I was in suspect for an assault charge. And when they came to the door, I was not home. My sister was home, and they told her they were looking for me for a traffic violation. They walked in through the door.
Which police force was this?
Pardon me?
Which police force?
Surrey.
Surrey RCMP. Have you made a written complaint?
No, I haven't, because this happened about 6-7 months ago, but it's bothered me ever since, and I was just listening to your program about search warrants, and
Okay.
I just wanted to bring up that question.
Okay, we'll leave it to you. But if people have a complaint, Michael, I wish they'd put the complaint in writing and put it in right now.
Should be done to the police commission forthwith.
Because after the Vancouver business, I'm quite sure that complaints will be responded to very quickly. I'm going to do one more with Michael, a short one after the break. Rule 12. Michael Bolton, B-O-L-T-O-N. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think Mr. Bolton, that Mr. Webster probably touched on my interest in your subject, and that is, it's as far as the doctors are concerned, it's a matter of the public purse, and where the taxpayers' monies are involved, that the fishing expeditions are, I think, in a special category, and doctors' records should be available, not only just for income tax, but for any other reason. They have a higher duty of care than the average man on the street, just as lawyers have a higher duty of care. They're in a position.
Well, it's precisely because doctors and lawyers do have a higher duty of care, because they're entrusted with the private information of individuals about their state of health, about their legal affairs, and so on. It's precisely for those reasons that the right to privacy is important to protect. I don't dispute the need to monitor the cost of the public purse in these areas, especially Medicare, which is a terrific thing in our society. But it's got to be done in a way, in a restrained way, that abides by legal rules and protects that right of privacy, which even the Supreme Court of Canada has recognized that there is a right to privacy of patients in their medical files.
Okay, sir.
I don't think you're concerned about the patients, actually. That's my feeling.
Well, the concern of the doctor is certainly partly for himself, but it's partly for the patients. In this particular case, there was evidence that Dr. Bishop had taken a poll of a good many of his patients who were among the 70 patients. He's now polled all of them. All 70 of them objected to any public authority having access to their personal private material on their medical file unless it were absolutely necessary.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
I have a problem that I think is an extension to patient confidentiality, and I'd like to take it a step further to involve life insurance companies.
Right.
I think this is a good one. If the patient doesn't have access to his file, but he has a disability claim of one kind or another, and the life insurance company can read a passing sentence in a letter from a doctor where suspicion is put forward by the doctor that it might be not as serious as the patient is aware that it is, but the patient doesn't have access to that opinion, the life insurance company can actually use that information to damage the patient's chances for a fair hearing, etc. So that is one very, very serious flaw.
Certainly is.
There's not letting patients have full and complete access to any letters that have been turned over to insurance companies.
It can be a problem. There's no doubt about that.
It's criminal, sir.
There can be great prejudice to a patient if a doctor has not maintained accurate records and reports, and if accurate information is not supplied to, for example, an insurance company, be it life insurance or be it ICBC.
That is correct.
It's I think the caller raises a very important and crucial issue. I don't know that we can answer it in terms of
in the workers'
matter
compensation now, you can get your total file, can't you? workers' compensation, you can get all the medical opinions right there and then.
But that was a hard-won victory in the courts, of course. That was the result of a Supreme Court judgment.
On common
originally.
sense basis, I would think that for any legal purpose, I'd be entitled to the total content of my file.
Mr. Webster, excuse me, Jack, just 1 second. May I interject again?
Sure.
My concern is that if a patient is grievously ill or whatever, the insurance company is supposed to pay the bloody claims, but I know of a case where they used a very flimsy excuse not to. The patient wasn't either well enough or, in any case, substantially wealthy enough to fight it.
Good point, sir. Thank you very much. Cam Loops, go ahead.
Hi, I have a question for your guest on warrants. I was watching your show on warrants in the States, and I was wondering if the law in Canada is similar to the States in the sense that if a police has a search warrant, let's say for drugs in your house, they suspect you of drugs, and they find stolen goods, can they use the fact that they found stolen goods in your house and prosecute you, or is the warrant specifically for drugs?
Okay, good question.
No, if they're in your house for a lawful purpose and they find in plain view stolen property which they know is stolen or which they strongly suspect is stolen, they can take that and you can be charged with the possession of stolen property, and that evidence can be used against you. So the fact is that our law is very similar to the American law in that area.
In other words, if I'm looking for drugs and I find bars of gold, which I believe to be stolen, I can seize the bars of gold, and I can still be prosecuted on the bars of gold without it being wiped out in some silly technicality.
That's exactly correct, Jack.
You've been a very refreshing guest this morning, Michael Bolton, and I'm grateful for your presence here today on these two issues. Now, we're going to turn to Mark's story now and dial upon, and I must warn you now that there are a couple of phrases in here you might not like young children to hear, so that's my disclaimer after the break.
Congress has tried to revise the act. It's been thrown out as the phone companies make a profit on it, and they collect the money for this. This is the phone bill the Bittner family of North Vancouver received this month. At the bottom, a long list of calls, 11 in all, calls to the United States with the prefix 900. Calls Mr. and Mrs. Bittner didn't make.
Well, I was, puzzled at first to see this 900 service, and as Beth said, I thought, well, it's obviously a mistake, and so I phoned the operator to find out what it was, and.
You phoned the operator?
Yes, I phoned the operator.
And what did she say to you?
Well, the first thing she said was, you're not going to like this, and she was upset about it. She said that it was a sex line, is the term she used. And so I immediately got, quite upset about that, and I thought...
And you didn't use that?
No, I immediately started to think who might have used it, and of course, the only people that were in the home would have been the children.
And your children are how old?
My son is 8 and my daughter is 11, just...
There have been well-reported horror stories where parents have opened up their Visa or MasterCard bills and found their children had charged hundreds of dollars to the so-called sex fantasy phone calls. But the 900 service is much different. For one thing, the children don't need a phone card. All they need is to know the number, know how to dial, and this is what they can get.
Don't mind her. She gets a little crazy. You go on home. I think you like seeing my fuzzy little bush. Just watching me sing her myself. Okay, Sue, I'll show you. Just watch me ride this stallion. Oh, the horn is so hard.
We can't repeat any more of this. The sexual fantasy of two young girls in a playroom with rocking horses and music boxes just gets more graphic. The 900 service was launched last year by the giant AT&T Corporation from its computer located in Kansas City. The service was designed much like the toll-free 800 service, except the 900 service adds a charge to the caller, 50 cents for the first minute and 35 cents for each additional minute. It was meant for legitimate businesses, like mail-order houses and even talk shows.
When my daughter got home from being up the mountain skiing, Beth approached her and she said that her friend had told her about this number and made the calls.
Tell me about that, Mrs. Bittner, when you asked
Melanie about it?
I just came out and asked her. Actually, I told her that I had heard about the service line that you could phone, and they would tell you dirty stories. And she said, "Oh, yeah, how did..." Then she started telling me about it, and she was very upfront. We've always, told the children, if you tell a lie, you're going to get caught anyhow, and it's going to be a lot worse. And she was very upfront about it and told me about it, and the best she could. And
was she upset?
She was upset.
Melanie?
Yeah.
You're not upset about it anymore?
No.
Tell me, how did you do this?
My friend just came and told me this number.
And you tried it?
Yeah.
11 times?
I didn't try it 11 times.
But your friend came over and you both tried it 11 times?
I didn't try
She
it
tried it 11 times.
I guess so, I don't know.
Tell me, I don't want you to tell me exactly, but what did you hear?
I don't know.
Did you know what you were listening to?
Yeah. Well, kind of.
And what did you think?
It was gross. It was disgusting.
You kind of understood what it was.
Yeah.
The phone numbers appear to be widely available in schools throughout British Columbia. It's even rumored that you can get the numbers out of comic books. But one place for sure they're available is this month's edition of the Penthouse magazine. And in the back, there's a full-page ad which says, "Call us for the ultimate in erotic fantasy." It gives 3 phone numbers, each with a prefix 410. The rest of the 4 numbers we've blanked out so they can't be read. And at the bottom, there's a little advertisement for an adult pay TV channel, the Adult Entertainment Channel. The problem is nobody can do anything about it. BC Tel says that since the signal originates in the United States, there's nothing that they can do about it. As parents now, you can't lock the phone up, can you?
No.
What can you do?
Well, we talked to Melanie, and she's told us she won't call again. And, she's always kept to her word in the past. But there's really nothing you can do. I've made a lot of phone calls today to government places and different things, and I've just been told that there's nothing they can do, and I have to go through BC Tel, and they can't do anything because it's legal.
What do you mean nothing can be done about it? This is an astonishing situation because you don't have to use a credit card. The phone company charges you back to your phone for this call.
It's just like any long-distance number you would make, although you're charged on a reduced rate, regardless of how far away you're calling from. But the reason why there's nothing that can be done about it, this apparently had become a big issue in the United States just this last year. And Congress told the Federal Communications Commission, do something about this. Make sure that children cannot call this number. They went through 2 revisions. Each one has been thrown out of the courts as being unconstitutional. So there it sits.
In the United States?
In the United States. So of course we receive this stuff as a kind of pollution which we cannot stop.
What about the FCC?
Well, right now it's in litigation. I spoke with a chief litigation officer for the Federal Communications Commission in Washington this morning, and she said the 2 things that they have tried have both been ruled unconstitutional. One, they tried to restrict the hours at which it could be used, so theoretically there would be parental supervision. Well, that was
available
challenged.
from midnight till dawn or something.
And that was challenged on the basis it was a restriction of free speech because it would prevent adults from enjoying this at any time. Then the next thing they tried, which seemed to be quite sensible, is they said, all right, everybody who receives this will have to get a license to receive it, a kind of access code. They threw that out for the same reasons, and it's currently in litigation right now. And of course, our regulatory commissions and even BC Tel cannot do anything about it because there's no legislation that prevents this stuff from coming up here.
BC Tel can collect the money on it, can't they?
Well, I spoke with a spokesman for BC Tel, and they say that the amount that they receive is very, very small, and really they're not in any position to act as a censor. The interesting thing is that the phone company in the United States, which distributes this message, actually rebates part of the charge to the people who are putting this on, and that's the way they make money.
Oh, you mean the organizers? Well, because this is dial-a-kiddie porn, isn't it?
That's right, but there's all sorts of other services, Jack, on the 900 system that are actually quite good. For example, you can get astrology information. You can listen to the space shuttle on 900. There's betting and sports information, and in fact, it's probably a pretty good service.
And there's telephone talk show numbers.
And telephone talk show
numbers. So that somebody 900 calling from Skookumchuck or whatever across the country can get through without any problem. So what we've got now is an uncontrollable sex line for kiddie porn. Am I overstating it?
No, it appears to be that way, and there is no way to stop it.
Must be some way to stop it.
Well,
presumably it would certainly be in the public interest to stop it. Now, what about Penthouse? Did you speak to them at all?
I spoke with Penthouse this morning. I spoke with their vice president of communications, and she refused to tell me whether there was any connection between this adult entertainment channel and the Penthouse magazine. Refused to give me any information that would lead me to the advertiser who's advertised so lavishly in this magazine.
I always feel kind of ambivalent about doing these kind of stories. I'm such an old square, but at the same time, while we're making people aware of it, we're warning parents, which is the more important duty, to watch their telephone bills for 900 numbers.
I think the only thing that parents can do is to watch your bills when they come in the next time and make sure that if you see anything you don't understand, talk to your children right away.
It's not that expensive. One call you might not notice.
No, that's true, but the way these serial calls are going through, I think it would be noticeable. And it seems to be more endemic in certain schools than others. These numbers are apparently just running through like wildfire in some schools.
Oh, freedom of speech, what a blessing you are.
Well, the United States, they've had much more experience with their equivalent of our Charter of Rights, and I suppose this is just more fallout from that.
Well, you warned, therefore. There is a sex line, there is a 900 number. It's totally undesirable. It's against any form of kind of public decency.
I think so. I've got children, and I certainly wouldn't want them to be listening to that.
So watch it and put your foot down. Or is that the right thing to say, too?
Well, I would.
You've got to put your foot down. And I'll be back. Thank you very much, Mark Schneider, and I shall be back after the break. Sorry, I didn't have time to take telephone calls on this dial-upon caper, but we'll try and get that in tomorrow to see how you feel about this particular piece of so-called access and whatnot by telephone company. Well, not tomorrow. Is this Friday? You sure? Monday. Liberal Senator Jacques Hébert, the founder of Katimovic, which is being phased out of existence, and who's on the Senate Employment Committee or Unemployment Committee for Youth. And we're going to get a guy from Toronto on some draconian measures which may be brought in by the federal government against people with boats from 6-foot dinghies to 600-foot private launches. New rules for boaters of considerable interest. My name is Webster. I shall be back Monday at 9 a.m. precisely.
And they'll realize the bunkum that goes out of BCTV, the bunkum that goes out of the CBC, the bunkum that goes out of the Vancouver Sun.
I have never heard such bunkum from a politician, with all due respect. Most of them are bunkum. If you can say bunkum, I can say bunkum.
And then, again, that's bunkum.
Dr. McGeer and Bunkum Webster will continue the interview.
Expo 86, 70 days to go.